So roughly, the way we approach the question of this report, which is where should the reform priorities of the region lie after the crisis, is to look at three areas which we think have to do with this objective of making growth both safe and more vigorous. And so the three areas are development of local currency capital markets. So these are essentially financial markets in the countries where contracts are being made that are written in the domestic currency. This is about domestic currency lending as opposed to taking out mortgages, say, in Swiss francs or in euros. It's broadly about the use of domestic currency in the financial system. And so one amazing fact about the region is that there is relatively little of that. So most countries actually prefer to use foreign currencies in their domestic financial systems. Notwithstanding that similarity, what we found in the report is that the causes for why countries are doing that are actually amazingly diverse. So here we have a case of what seems to be a common problem, but which probably does not have a common diagnosis. And this is a very important realization because, of course, you would want to get the diagnosis right before you apply a particular cure. And the implication of this report is that the cure has to be quite different, depending whether you are talking, say, about a Central Asian country that has a lot of problems with predictability and volatility of inflation, or whether you talk about a country, say, in Central Europe or the Baltics, where inflation is fairly stable, but which has, say, very strong capital inflows pre-crisis, possibly the return of those after the crisis, and where maybe domestic bond markets are not developed for reasons related to size or just because that has been neglected as an area of development. One thing that everyone is always saying about this region, as well as others, is that it needs to improve its business environment. And so in this report, we really wanted to find out, what is it about the business environment that needs to be improved? And so we came up with a method that focuses on the relative obstacles to doing business in each country. So we didn't sort of want to particularly pay much attention to the fact that some countries rate all aspects of the business environment better than others, because that might have to do just with say, differences in views across countries of what constitutes a good business environment. So what we looked at really is what are the top 3, top 5, top 10 constraints across countries. And so here the amazing thing is, notwithstanding the diversity of our region, there are really 2 that come out in the top 3 concerns of most countries in the region, and that's skills, or the lack of skills to support businesses, and the other one is corruption. And so this is a very common perception in our region, that this is a big problem. Then there are, say, 3rd or 4th ranked, where we do find a bit more diversity across the region. If you go further east, infrastructure becomes a big concern, for example, whereas further west in the region, tax administration is a big concern. But overall, really quite a lot of commonality in what businesses view as the problem. And then finally, a third thing which I found surprising is a good deal of the report deals with exports. So one problem that the region had in the decade leading up to the crisis is that it was exporting a lot less than it imported. Not true for all countries, but for most countries. Some countries, of course, were strong commodity exporters, but there they had very large trade deficits as far as the non-commodity part of the economy is concerned. And so we really wanted to analyze the causes of this and with a view to changing the pattern of growth in the future, making it more balanced and less reliant on this capital inflows that one needs to finance a persistent trade deficit. And so when we did that, what we discovered is that in actual fact, exports were very vigorous in the decade prior to the crisis. The region did very well in expanding its export share in the growth in the world economy. It's comparable to China in its vigor on exports. But this really startlingly good performance was more than swamped by even faster growth of imports, which has to do with the fact that inflows grew very fast, capital inflows, credit grew very fast, and so domestic demand was extremely strong. But as far as the export side is concerned, the region was quite good. Now, here's the snag. It's not obvious that this can continue. And the reason is that it was partly based on these one-off factors, or factors that gradually diminish over time. Labor costs were very cheap in the region a decade ago. There was a lot of reduction in tariffs as countries, for example, joined free tariff areas. Some countries joined the European Union, others got favorable trade deals. And finally, of course, the world economy as a whole and the export partners of our region, the trade partners, were growing very quickly. And so these were all favorable circumstances which can no longer be taken for granted in the future. And so basically the report really looks at what the region has to do to still maintain its vigor on the export side. And the real key there is going to be non-tariff barriers to exports, and again, the improvement of basic institutions, basic parts of the business environment, both in a narrow sense, obstacles that are related to exports, such as customs, for example, but also in a broader sense, again, things like the rule of law, corruption, skills, and so forth.